Before I kind of go into what the service does and how we want to support advocacy, I wanted to give a little bit of background just to explain who the Children's Commissioner's Office is and what kind of the remit of our service is. The Children's Commissioner was created under the Children Act 2004, and that act lays out what the Children's Commissioner is responsible for. The current Children's Commissioner is Ann Longfield, and it says that the Children's Commissioner has a legal duty to promote and protect the rights of children and to make sure that their voices and views are heard, and that basically the issues around their rights and entitlements are brought to decision makers and shared. So under the 2014 Children and Family Act, it specified that the Children's Commissioner must also provide advice, assistance, and representation to children under Section 8A of the Children and Families Act 2004, which is children in care, care leavers, those living away from home, and those working with children's services, which is where Help at Hand comes in. This function was previously with the Office of the Children's Rights Director, which sat as a part of Ofsted. But in 2014, that was dissolved and the function was brought to the Children's Commissioner's Office. So really the service has only been with the Children's Commissioner for about the last 2 years. So while we are a service for young people, mainly, we also take a lot of inquiries from professionals and from advocates. We will always aim to include a young person wherever possible, though. The Help at Hand brand was developed working with a group of young people with care experience. What we wanted to do was find a way to communicate who we are, our remit that was child-friendly and made young people and professionals feel confident to get in touch with us. As I keep on saying, the Section 8A remit, children in care, children living away from home, or working with children's services, or care leavers, is not something that fits kind of easily. Where that comes from is essentially those are young people who a public body is exercising functions for. So it was viewed that they need a particular regard for their rights and entitlements because they might be more vulnerable to having their rights infringed. So when we were developing Help at Hand, we worked with young people to first kind of articulate what it is that we want to achieve as a service and what's important to us. So this can best be articulated in our promise to children and young people. Essentially, we promise to listen and to empower them to know their rights and entitlements. And then the second part of what we do that we feel is just as important is making sure that we challenge others and stand up for them when their rights and entitlements are not being upheld. So I wanted to give an idea of what it is that we do, besides kind of just, the brand and the name and everything like that. So we're an advice line, currently accessible via telephone and email. We're open 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, but we're aiming to extend those hours as the service grows because we know that young people don't always want to access the service during those hours. We're staffed by 3 child rights advisors who are over there in the corner. Everyone wave. And I'd be happy to talk to you later a bit more about our service if you would like. Essentially, we break down what we do into 3 things. We provide advice where knowledge is missing, assistance where there's insufficient support, and representation when someone needs to listen. So advice is signposting, providing an explanation around care planning, questions about pocket money, how a care leaver might access their higher education, pretty much everything, but we try and put it in accessible language for them, and if we can, provide fact sheets or direct them to other places where they could get the information they need. We're really big on our assistance part of what we do. So what we consider assistance is providing practical help to help a young person solve an issue. When a young person gets in touch with us, they may not be at that stage yet where they want to make a complaint. They may just say, I can't get a hold of my social worker. I want to know what's going on. I don't feel like I'm being listened to. So we'll explain to them the range of options that they have, such as accessing a face-to-face advocate. We will also offer to make contact with social workers or independent reviewing officers on their behalf. Essentially, we want to give them the experience that we're responsive to what they want to have happen, and that essentially that they feel that we will resolve things as quickly as possible for them. So lastly, and what I feel makes us slightly different than other kind of telephone advocacy services, is we can provide formal representation. So sometimes that means myself or the team of child rights advisors formally writing to service managers, independent reviewing officers, or team managers challenging local authority decisions. But more often what we mean when we say representation is asking the Children's Commissioner herself to write to directors of children's services on behalf of individual children. So Ms. Longfield will do this not just for individual children, but also where we get alerted to systemic issues in a local authority. Unfortunately, we don't have the power to make them change their decision, but it's about using our influence and also the relationships that the commissioner builds with directors of children's services to make them review kind of practices. And we do have a fairly good track record of of influencing change for children. Where we can't affect change and we remain really concerned, we're currently working on formal intelligence sharing links with Ofsted so that we can raise those issues with them and they can be followed up during inspection. So ultimately, we want to be more than just a helpline and use the wider structure of the Children's Commissioner's Office to make sure that what we do is effective not just for individual children, but for all of the children who are in our remit. The Children's Commissioner has a statutory role at the national level, and it's specifically part of her remit to liaise with ministers and to report to Parliament about issues. So it puts us in a unique position to make sure that evidence that comes into the advice service is then relayed to decision makers. So besides feeding into the policy work of the Children's Commissioner, we also use the advice line to feed into the research that the Children's Commissioner's Office does. One of the powers that the Children's Commissioner has is to request data from bodies that exercise functions in relation to children. This year, there's a specific focus on gathering national and local data related to stability indicators for children in care. So how many placement moves they've had, how often their social worker has changed, how many episodes they have of going missing, changing school, missing school, and it'll be the first time that all of these data sets have ever been put together. So we're trying to link information from the advice line to that to give a better picture of what stability, or more often instability, looks like for children in care. And really, we know that advocates are a powerful source of information about local authority practice. We get a lot of calls from advocates telling us about policies affecting children across their area, such as local authorities having kind of a set policy to move children to in-house placements when they become available. Also things relating to advocacy, such as having an internal person who has to approve whether or not an advocacy referral can be granted. So we're really keen to build working relationships with advocates and advocacy providers so that this information can be shared with us and we can make use of it at the national level. So like I was saying, we believe in working closely with advocates, and something I want to really emphasize is that in no way do we see ourselves as replacing face-to-face advocacy. The work we do, we aim to supplement face-to-face advocacy. So when young people get in touch, we always explain to them that they have the right to a face-to-face advocate, and we'll complete a referral for them if they want. If a young person gets in touch with us and they already have an advocate, we'll ask for their permission to speak to the advocate so that we can understand what work the advocate has already done and if there's anything that we can do alongside. Sometimes advocates will say to us that they think a letter from the commissioner might get things moving in the right direction, and we're happy to do that. We're also happy to provide advocates and professionals with advice or clarification, or like I was saying, to listen to systemic issues that they think we might be able to either take up ourselves or to refer on to Ofsted so that they can be checked during inspection. So the statutes outlining the Children's Commissioner's role instruct her to have a special regard for advocacy. As many of you are aware, there was a report published by the Children's Commissioner's Office earlier this year that looked at advocacy and outlined many of the barriers to access. And the session earlier today, which obviously looked at how you can measure outcomes and the many positive outcomes of having access to that. So Help at Hand is trying to take some of that work forward from the report By having regular communication with advocates, we want to make sure that we challenge issues as they come up. So specific issues that have already come to our attention that we have challenged directly are local authority practices relating to restricting hours that essentially mean that an advocate can't do their job properly with a young person. Policies or structures that impact on independence or effectiveness. So for example, we recently had a case where we found out that the advocate was being managed by the head of the complaint service, which would obviously be a conflict of interest for a young person wanting to progress a complaint. Also, there have been instances where there's been just a straight-up failure to provide advocacy for children in the remit, and we've written to local authorities to remind them that they're failing in their statutory duty. The key messages that we wanted to share about the service are really that we are for young people, but we're happy to work alongside advocates. We aim to be quickly responsive to issues that matter to them. We always act in line with their views, and we really are about challenging the establishment, and we'd like to see a long-term committed change to the way that rights and entitlements are accessed by children in our remit. Get in touch if you have any questions. We're over in the corner. We have lots of materials to share, and I appreciate your time and all your hard work. We rely heavily on advocates, and we're always constantly impressed by the hard work that everyone does. So thank you very much. Yeah.